You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. Hello and welcome to Garibaldi Red, the Nottingham Forest podcast from Nottinghamshire Live. My name is Matt Davies and we're back after our Christmas break, and it feels a bit like when you've been at school holidays and you've forgotten how to write. I've forgotten how to introduce this, so I'm just bumbling through as normal. But I'm joined today by Reds correspondent Sarah Clapson. Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
Good morning, Matt. I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
Good. Good, yes. And BBC Radio Nottingham sport presenter David Jackson returning to the podcast. Morning, David. You well?
Very well. Happy New Year. It's all good. We're unbeaten in 5 at Forest. It's all going well. This is good. Let's just ride the wave.
Absolutely. New year, new era. Success is coming. Here we go. Right. So, as David says, we're doing very well. Preston 0, Forest 1 is a very good result for Forest to start the year with. Sarah, you travelled up there. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought Forest were probably deserving of the win. They played really well in the first half, just didn't create too many clear-cut chances. They had so much of the ball put in. I lost count of the number of crosses they put in, but didn't really test the goalkeeper too much. Second half was a little bit different. Preston came out and put a bit of pressure on, but Forest stood firm. They looked pretty resolute. I can't remember there have been too many nervy moments. I know Brice Samba made some really good saves, important saves at crucial times. But then they got the penalty, went ahead, and I thought they were probably deserving of the win, really. And it keeps that unbeaten run going, which was important. It just makes it a little bit more positive and the mood a little bit better and just a bit brighter around the place, I think, a little bit.
Before we go through the game in detail, then I wanted to thought it'd be interesting to have someone from the BBC on for talking about this game, because David, you weren't able to go. I mean, that's part of the course for yourself this season, but Colin Fray and Steve Hodge couldn't go either, and you had to cover it remotely. A very unusual situation in these very unusual times. How did it go for the BBC? Did it actually work all right?
It did. We got a bit lucky that the iFollow stream didn't buffer too much. We were actually okay with that. But the reasoning behind it was not the government rules. Of course, the government rules are that you can travel in and out of a Tier 4 area for work. But the BBC decided to interpret that as well. Do you have to go still? Because Radio Lancashire, for our instance, were doing commentary on the Preston Forest game. So therefore, in theory, Radio Nottingham could take their commentary. Or we could do as we did, which is put Colin Fray and Steve Hodge in this room. Actually, this is the room I'm in, the conference room at BBC Radio Nottingham, and they could watch the game on a stream and provide commentary. And we decided that would be the better option, because we thought that our listeners would prefer to listen to the people they're used to, Colin Fray and Steve Hodge, to commentate on the game, even though they weren't at the match. But they were able to see the game, and we thought that would be a better service. So, yeah, they watched it from here in the conference room, very well socially distanced, a good 3 or 4 meters between them, and on one of those tellies up there, put the game on. Yes, thankfully, it worked all right. I mean, they were between 30 seconds and a minute behind the actual action. So if you were monitoring your phone on social media and also listening to the radio, then you'd have known there was a goal coming up and then heard Colin commentating on it. But, that was as good as we could do in the circumstances while Nottinghamshire is in a Tier 4 area, and it went as well as we could have hoped. And, you do sort of still worry about whether, if iFollow just suddenly decides to crumble for a minute or two, then Colin Fray's going to have to do some expert filling for a minute. We wait for the feed to catch up. And it didn't help that the game then went on to 9 minutes of stoppage time, because we got 9 minutes of stoppage time. We were a minute behind already. I virtually hardly had any time to talk at the end of the commentary on the programme, because we were virtually done. But there we are.
Well, the good thing is iFollow is super reliable. There's been no problem with it all. So back to the game then. Forest won through a penalty for Lewis Grabban, handball by Darnell Fisher blocking Cafu's shot. There was a lot of debate about the penalty itself, the taking of it. There was also a debate yesterday. I did a piece with Stephen Warnock from EFL on Quest saying that Preston should have had a free kick and that Fisher was fouled by Grabban, and that's what sent him over. I mean, Sarah, what was your view on it? Was it a penalty? Was it a double take? Were Forest a bit fortunate there?
I thought it was a penalty. It was Cafu's shot that hit the arm. I've watched that again, the actual penalty taken from Grabban, and it is quite difficult to see. Chris Hughton says he slips. and that's why it looked like he hit the ball twice. I guess you kind of have to take his word for that. It didn't look like he'd struck it twice, but I mean, their manager seemed pretty furious about it and thought the referee had made a big mistake. But to me, it looked all right. Like I say, I've watched it a few times, and it is really difficult to tell from the angles. But I guess you kind of have to take Lewis Grabban and Chris Hughton's word on that one.
What did you think, David? I mean, I've seen a lot of replays of it. He probably does hit it twice, but it's so hard for a ref, isn't it, to make that decision in an instant?
I don't think there's any replay I've seen where I've been 100% certain that it was a double hit. And if it was so quick that how is a referee ever supposed to see it? I think even if they'd had VAR, and even if you'd watched it over on VAR, I'm not sure how you'd have come to a completely conclusive decision on it. Even if he did, it was so quick, and I can't see that that's in any way an advantage to him. Let's face it, he didn't hit it very well, did he? You know, he slipped. It's gone right down the middle of the goal, and thankfully, from Forest's point of view, gone in. So I just think how a referee is ever going to be able to see it, how that can be classed as a massive mistake or a huge error on the referee's part, I think is really, really harsh. The referees are under enough pressure and got such big decisions to be able to make at certain times. To then say that that's a massive error, I think that's a bit harsh, really, on the referee, because he slipped, and it doesn't obviously look like two touches. That's fine. Was it a penalty? I think absolutely. As he's gone down, he seems to me he's put his right arm out like that. It's hit him there. Handball, penalty. I don't see how it can be an argument, really.
I mean, Greg Oram here. Happy New Year to you, Greg. Says about time we had a bit of luck go our way. I mean, Forest have done a lot of things that make me think that they look like a relegation team recently, with the goal against Stoke and the goal against Reading and all that. But they do seem to be turning a corner, hopefully, and maybe that bit of luck did go their way. I mean, do you think, David, they are actually turning a corner now, or are we just being typical football fans and getting way ahead of ourselves?
Well, they're certainly not playing anybody as good as they played in that run of defeats. I think that's unquestionable. So, you know, the fact that they're on a bit more of an unbeaten run, there's still a lot they're not doing right, let's be honest. But they've kept a couple of clean sheets lately. Was it 3 clean sheets in 5? Only conceded a couple of goals over the last few weeks. So something's improving. I think having Joe Worrell back is a big difference, because he's clearly vocal, both on and off it. And I think that's making a difference. They're looking a little bit more solid back there. But then, you know, they're not coming up against teams like Bournemouth. They haven't done in the last few weeks. If you were to put them up against that Bournemouth side again, they'd probably concede a couple of goals. The thing that's perhaps a bit more impressive, the thing that impressed me on Saturday was they didn't only start after an hour and then decent for 10 minutes and pathetic the rest of it. It was a bit more consistent within the course of 90 minutes, if you see what I'm saying. And I think, have they turned a corner? I don't know. I'm always a bit worried about saying stuff like that, because I just think they're unbeaten in 5. I think that's okay, but I think they sort of had to be unbeaten in this run, given how dreadful the results were before, and given the calibre of opposition. They sort of had to beat Sheffield Wednesday, and they did. So fair enough. You know, they sort of needed to get something at Millwall, given the run of results they were on. And having gone behind, they fought back and got it. Fair enough. You know, at Stoke, they should have won it. They didn't take the chance when Cafu threw 1-on-1. Should have won that game. And I think if they'd have actually been able to deliver some balls into the box for Lewis Grabban at Preston on Saturday, then I think we'd probably have seen Forest 2-0 up by half time, or, you know, because the conversion rates of crosses, with it 3 out of 23 were successful crosses on Saturday. That's appalling. I mean, when you look at the calibre of players, the ability of those players in that team, and it took about 3 out of 23 across 90 minutes. The fact they've had 23 suggests that they're getting into the right positions. To only then find another Forest player 3 times, I mean, it's not good enough. So that there's still a lot wrong with Forest. They haven't just suddenly turned a corner, found their form, and great, they're going to fly up the league. It's nothing like that. There's clearly still issues in there, but they're able to find a few results lately, and that's good. And it's got them a little bit outside of the relegation places, although, you know, not loads. And so that's fine, and that's good, and that's very positive, and we should embrace that and enjoy that. But, you know, if they are not going to go flying up that table, and still they can just get some balls into the box, give the striker some delivery to actually be able to put the ball in the net.
I mean, David's got a point there, hasn't he, say about crossing? The quality is a bit hit and miss. And do you think, are they getting enough men in the box as well? It seems to be Grabban and Yates, and not even the number 10 seems to be in the box, whoever it is. David's right, isn't he, really?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the one thing that really let them down on Saturday. They did get into good positions. They did put some nice moves together. It was the final ball. It was that bit of quality right at the end. They just couldn't get it right. They had quite a few where the fullback, Cyrus Christie, Yuri Ribeiro, they both got forward and put those crosses in, but they just weren't of the right quality to create a chance or to find an opening or give Lewis Grabban something to work with. And I mean, that's something that they've had all season. It's not a new problem, this scoring goals and creating chances. It's something that's dogged them all year, and it isn't a quick fix. It's something that is going to take time. I think David's probably spot on, really. There are very small signs of progress in the fact that they've had this unbeaten run, and there have been good moments. There have been some positives. I think they do look a lot more solid at the back, and that had to be a starting point. I think Chris Hughton had to make that a priority to stop conceding those goals. And in the last few games, they have looked better. There's been those individual errors sometimes which have cropped up and proved costly, but I think in general the defence has looked pretty good. Now it's about getting them going forward, and it is still a big issue. It is a problem. There is a lot to work on there. It's not an easy one to find a solution to.
How much credit do we give Grabban for bouncing back from that Stoke game? Because obviously he scored at Preston, but I didn't see the game, so I don't know what his all-round play was like. I mean, Sarah, do you give him a lot of credit for how he recovered at Preston or not?
Yeah, I think you have to. I don't think it was his best game, but I thought he worked hard. He didn't have a lot to work with. That was partly the problem. He was living off scraps for a lot of the time, which he has done for most of this year. But to step up and take the penalty at a crucial time, I think you have to give him a lot of credit for that, albeit he perhaps didn't hit it as cleanly as he would want to. But just to come back from that error at Stoke, he took a lot of criticism from that. He continues to take a lot of stick for wearing the captain's armband. I genuinely don't really understand that one myself, but I think he stepped up when needed, and he scored the winner. And you know, that's what you need from your striker. You need them to take the chances when they get them, and he got one on Saturday and he took it.
Where do you stand on captaincy, David? I mean, everyone says there's no leaders left in football. I tend to see leadership as not necessarily shouting and bawling. You can lead by example and do different things. Does Grabban strike you as a captain when you see him or not then?
Not automatically, I wouldn't say. I think if you were to just take a completely fresh look at that team and decide who to make captain, I wouldn't choose Lewis Grabban, but then I wouldn't ordinarily choose a striker. I tend to, if I was a manager, and there's a great many reasons why I'm not, by the way, so you know, don't read too much into that, but if I was a manager, I'm not sure I'd give that to the striker. I think I'd want strikers just to go, look, you're just up there to score the goals, and I'd kind of want generally a midfielder or a defender to kind of be the one that's your captain out on the pitch. But so I wouldn't necessarily pick him as captain. I think Joe Worrell would be probably my automatic first choice in that role. But Joe Worrell's going to do that anyway. So Joe Worrell's already going to be the one shouting at the defence and getting them organised. So does he need an armband to do that? Not really. Does somebody else having the armband mean he's not going to do that? No. So maybe giving Lewis Grabban the captaincy and saying, here you go, here's a position of responsibility for you, here is a sign of respect for you, then maybe that gets something out of Lewis Grabban. And if it does, then it's fine. It's doing its job. Because, as you said about leadership, if you're getting that elsewhere anyway, and if the senior players who are in the team are doing that anyway, then maybe they don't need the armband. If it does something for Lewis Grabban, fine, let him have it.
It also says please don't leave as well, because Chris Hughton was asked about that, but I think it was by Colin after the game, wasn't it? About all the. It
was me. I had to do it because he couldn't speak to him because he was.
Yeah.
So no, we did him on the phone. Yeah, we spoke. This is one of the other complications of the whole thing. We were relying on pictures of the snowy pitch that we didn't know if they were live or not because they were on the screen. We don't know what iFollow was showing. Is this 2 hours ago? Is it now? We don't know. And then after the game, yes, I spoke to the manager and Joe Worrell on the phone, and I asked him that whether he thought that Lewis Grabban would be going, and because obviously there was speculation earlier in the year, and now we're into January, and he said he was confident that he'd be staying. And, he is somebody who, if you get the best out of Lewis Grabban, he just will score goals. We knew that earlier in the season when he was missing chance after chance, including that horrific one. Which game was that? He took past the goalkeeper. And you think, what is going on? What is going on? But with him that he will get goals eventually. He will keep stepping up. He will keep doing it, and he will eventually get you goals. So I don't think there was any doubt on that. And maybe it does say that. Maybe it does say to Lewis Grabban that you are an important part of my team. You're an important part of this club. And here's something that maybe gets more out of him in the dressing room. Maybe wearing the armband does something like that for him that we don't see, that maybe the manager does. And I actually asked Chris Hughton about it when he first took over. I said, will you be keeping Chris Hughton as captain? And I think he had done just for the first game. And he said, yeah. He said, partly because he already was. And I thought, well, actually, that's a fair point, because there's one thing giving somebody an armband. There's another thing taking it off somebody and what that says to him. And if you think, unless there is a tangible benefit somewhere else in the team to somebody else having it, then why do that to a senior player? Why say, no, I don't want you as captain? That's quite a negative thing to say to somebody who you don't want to be kind of thinking about that in and around the dressing room, really. So there's probably a bit of that in there as well.
There was a point after the goal, and you picked up on it, Sarah, and other people did, where Yates is waving people over to celebrate. Dan Smith said about why didn't the players celebrate him. I'm not really bothered about that, if it's personal or not, but it was noticeable that Yates was waving players over. Is that maybe just because it was a penalty and players were kind of backed off in case the keeper saved it? Or is that an interesting point about morale? Am I reading way too much into it that Yates was waving people over?
Yeah, I think we're all reading far too much into it. I don't think the team spirit is as good as it was last year, but equally, I don't think there's so much of a problem that players aren't wanting to go over and celebrate when somebody scores. I think it was perhaps more that people were taking their time to go over and celebrate. It's difficult to see on the camera angle where people have picked it up from, where the players were running over anyway, and Yates was just kind of getting them to come a bit quicker. I think you just, when things aren't going for you and when you've been on a bad run, you try and find things perhaps where just to try and justify, oh, look, we've got this terrible team spirit. This is why we're not doing very well. This is why players aren't celebrating with each other. But I think you do read far too much into it. I think they're probably, like I said, I don't think the team spirit is as good as it was last year, but I don't think there's massive divisions in the dressing room to the extent that that's why Forest have not done as well as what we all thought they would.
Yeah, it's not Van Hooyd on strike then, David. You've interviewed players this season. I've interviewed, obviously Sarah has. And, I agree with Sarah. It's not, that great bonds of previous years, I wouldn't say yet, but maybe coming through a bit of adversity, hopefully they are forming a bit of a team spirit maybe. Yeah, I don't think you'd expect team spirit to be particularly high when they're losing football matches and they are where they are in the league. And, they got the goal eventually, but I think we all knew that if they'd actually, as we said earlier, actually put crosses into the box, created the chances that they should have done given the positions they were in, then they should have been ahead anyway. And so I think maybe there's just a little bit of that in there as well, of like, well, okay, yeah, we've got the goal, but, it's not like they've just scored a goal in the last minute of a game that sent them up into the playoffs or something. It isn't perhaps necessarily that same buoyant, jubilant kind of atmosphere that you get from a great team spirit. Forest, just over 12 months ago, they were winning football matches and going top as they did at Stoke. That's going to just get everybody excited. At the moment, that's not really where Forest are. Where Forest are at the moment is grinding out results and just sort of coming out of it and going, okay, where are we? What do we need to do next? And they're in the middle of that. They're not really in the spirit of doing a lap of honour to celebrate a goal and jump all over each other and celebrate it. I don't sense that's the mood, and nor would I particularly expect it to be. It's a good win, and I'm sure that they went off, and I'm sure they were very happy. Speaking to Joe Worrell after, he sounded a very different Joe Worrell to the one that we spoke to a few weeks ago, when he sounded a bit cross, quite angry, frustrated, annoyed at what was going on at Forest, and he sounded like he felt like things were beginning to turn. He wasn't unrealistic about it, but he sounded a bit like, yeah, we're on the road. But it seems to me at the moment that what's going on is more of an atmosphere of hard work and just trying to get this team out of the mess that they know they shouldn't be in already. And that's where the mood is at the moment. And that's kind of where it should be, really. Now, I want to make a ridiculous pitch for Ryan Yates here, which you feel free to shoot me down, but is he becoming, and this is not a direct comparison for the name of the player, but could he become Forest's version of a Jordan Henderson type player who's more than just a defensive midfielder who actually provides leadership from the middle of the park and cannot dictate the play, but is better than what people give him credit for? So I'm not saying he's Jordan Henderson before people in the comments say, don't be ridiculous, but is he evolving into more than what he is perceived as, I suppose I'm saying. That's an open forum for you to both shoot me down.
Who wants to shoot him first? Do you want to
you go first. You go first.
No, look, I like him. I mean, I remember him speaking to him as a young lad when he was out at Notts and he was doing really well and working hard and looking decent. And I think he's a good player. He works hard, and there's a lot to his game. There's a lot to his game that still needs to keep moving and keep improving. But I like him. I think he's consistent. I think he works really hard. I think he offers the team a lot. I'd like to see him getting some goals at the other end of the pitch. I'd like to see him joining, or maybe he's just not told to kind of get up into those positions. But earlier on in the season, we were seeing him, whenever there was a ball into the box, it seems to be Ryan Yates who was getting on the end of it at times earlier on in the season. And I kept thinking, why is it always him? You know, why is there not someone else there to do that job for him? Because he was missing those chances and getting some stick for it. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure it necessarily should be his job anyway to be there getting those when he was meant to be a defensive midfielder. But he does. He runs and he runs and he runs and he works really hard. And he's not short of ability either. I just think that we put, for some reason, supporters put a bigger level of expectation on him. I don't know. But I mean, I like him. I'm going to sort of shy away from using the name Jordan Henderson because I never know when it's going to get put back at me. But I think I know what you mean. You mean kind of that playing that kind of role for Forest that Henderson does in Liverpool. And I think if you want to sort of start building a team around that, you can. I sort of think that. I mean, I think there are more pressing issues around elsewhere in the team. I think once you start sorting those out, then maybe that role becomes a little less pressured, and we might start seeing him maybe being able to express himself a little bit more, and there being a little bit less pressure on him and a bit less spotlight on him from supporters. And I think that'd be good for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, in the comments, Greg Orme, who's definitely my favourite viewer, says good comparison, actually, Matt. So, that's you bang on, Greg.
Who's and picking these comments? You are, aren't you? That's why.
I am, yeah. But then others are saying, Dan Smith says he's below average with the ball, his feet. Karen Price says he gives stupid balls away. I don't know if he actually does. I think that's more of a reputation, but I haven't seen his passing statistics. But I think what I like about him is not that he misses the chances, but like David says, he is brave enough to actually get forwards and, try and take responsibility when, if everyone did what he'd done this season, I think Forest would be better off. Sarah, do you want to shoot me down about it?
I would never shoot you down, Matt. No, I think it's probably a sign really of how Forest have been doing, that him and Joe Worrell are probably players of the season so far, because they've been the most consistent and they've been probably putting the best performances, really. I like Ryan Yates. I think he gets far too much stick, mainly because he is a defensive midfielder and people want him to be something that he's not. He's put in that position to do a certain job. He does that job. He does it pretty well, particularly alongside Samba in recent weeks. He's done all right. He's not going to play defence splitting passes all the time. He's not going to ping balls around and create chances. That's really not what he's there for. There's so many other creative attacking players in that team who should be doing that job. It's not really on Ryan Yates to do that, but he does get in decent positions. If he could head a ball, he would have probably had about 5 goals by now. But he does all right. I think he's a good player, and I can see why Chris Hughton has made him pretty much one of the first names on the team sheet at the minute.
And I think that's what I'm saying. Sorry, just come in. I think that's what I'm saying, Sarah. When you say that there's other players on the pitch who should be creating those opportunities, I think when they start doing that, or when other players come in this month and start doing that, it might take that pressure off him. People might stop looking at him for things that maybe shouldn't be expected of him, and that they can start doing that. He can just do his job, and we can all go, oh, okay, we see how it fits. And maybe at the moment he's doing his job well. It's others that need to actually be kind of doing their job, which is getting some balls into the box, getting some spaces, creating some opportunities, and getting the goals. And then we can go, okay, now we see where everybody's fitting in and doing their jobs right.
Now, talking of doing their jobs right, Brice Samba was named in the team of the week for the championship for Sky. So, I mean, David, is he back to his best? Was he ever that bad? Where do you stand on Brice Samba this season?
I mean, he was great last season, wasn't he? Absolutely brilliant last season. I think when we came back after the COVID break for the end of last season, he didn't quite look the same. I'm not quite sure why. I think there's a few players who I would sort of class as entertainers. People who like the crowd, who sort of thrive on the crowd. I think Joe Lolly was perhaps a little bit like that. Joe Lolly's the sort of player who likes to pick up the ball on the halfway line, and when people start getting up out their seats, it kind of drives them on a little bit more. And I think Brice Samba's a little bit. I feel like Brice Samba kind of feeds a little bit off the crowd, which is maybe a bit unusual for a goalkeeper, but that is a bit what he's like. And I don't think we did see the best of him for a spell. I think he probably, when you're losing, I think you automatically look at the goalkeeper because they're the ones that are conceding the goals, and they're the things that you watch over and again. And I think probably, actually, if you look to the amount of saves he made, it was probably, and I seem to remember seeing a stat from a few weeks ago that he was one of the best goalkeepers in the division in terms of the amount of saves per shots or something. I can't remember the exact stats, but the stats were, reasonably good in his favour. I thought it was a very good save he made down to his left in the second half on Saturday. So yeah, I think he's doing well. I think that comes from having probably confidence in the players in front of him. And when you're not playing in a defence, when defenders just keep losing the man they're meant to be marking, then I think it helps, and I think it gives him maybe a bit more confidence, and you start to see something better from him. And I think he's doing well again, and it's great to see, because an informed Brice Samba, it kind of ends up having another knock-on effect, that he gets the confidence from the defence. That gives confidence back to the defence, because they see they've got this strong, informed goalkeeper behind them who's making great saves, and it continues to sort of grow from there. So it's great to see.
That's an interesting point by David about entertainers, because Cyrus Christie raised it in an interest. He did press before the game, and it was an interesting conversation. He talks about players being, thrive as entertainers, thriving off a crowd, and Samba's someone who fits in that bracket, which I never thought of. Does Christie have a point there, Sarah? Do you think about players like Lolly and Knockaert thriving on a crowd, or is that an out for a player, do you think?
No, I think he definitely has a point. And Brice Samba definitely falls into that as well. He likes to wind up the opposition fans. And Joe Lolly, probably even Sammy Ameobi to an extent, Anthony Knockaert, players like that, they want to get fans going. They want to entertain people. And I know people say, well, everybody's playing behind closed doors. It's the same for everybody at the moment. But it's how it affects individual players and teams. It has a different effect. And I think for Forest, I know I've said this before, I'm convinced that last season they wouldn't have dropped out of the top six if they'd still been playing in front of fans. And I think this year they probably would have started a little bit better if crowds had been there, because they have players that want to do that. And I think they just get so much from them. When you've got a full city ground behind you, going into the last few minutes of a game and you need a goal or you need to hold on for a clean sheet, it makes such a difference. Even when you go to away grounds and you've got a strong away following and they're making a load of noise and they just get you over the line. And I think Forest have really suffered from it.
Let's turn to January transfers then and throw some quick fire questions at David, which I told him I was going to do, because we've talked about some of these before, Sarah. So I'm going to throw some names at David and he can give me his thoughts on this before we discuss transfers more generally. So Anthony Knockaert, last game against Preston, in theory, where do you stand on that, David? Try and buy him, try and loan him, bin him off? What do you reckon?
I remember when he came off the bench, didn't he, for his debut? I remember thinking, blimey, you can see the ability of him. Was it against Derby? I can't remember. He came on at half time, I think, Derby, wasn't it? And he just thought, okay, bags of ability. This guy's kind of going to make a difference. And then it's just not really happened. And I was really pleased to see young Alex Martin getting an opportunity, and great to see his sort of enthusiasm and just the running that he offered, and obviously ultimately getting a goal as well. But I think he has gradually sort of picked it back up again. Anthony Knockaert and Chris Hughton made a similar point when I spoke to him on Saturday, that he sort of feels like he's getting towards where he wants him to be now. So I'd probably be thinking, yeah, let's extend the loan if you can. He sounded like he wanted to stay. when we spoke to him the other night, just after the Stoke game. And so he should be, because he's going to get football here, and he's not at Fulham, is he, in the Premier League, despite where they are in the table. I don't think he's probably going to get in that side. They've changed things around quite a lot, Fulham. So, yeah, I'd be looking to extend it, but I would be wanting more from him. And I think we'd probably be looking at getting other players in those areas as well, because I think if you've got a really good number 10 in that position, and as well as Cafu has done, I think Forest are kind of desperately in need of a really good number 10, somebody who's going to score goals, somebody who's going to carve open an opposition defence perhaps a bit more than he's been doing, and also that when he's given an opportunity like he was given the other night at Stoke, and can put it away. So I think that's for that position. For Knockaert, sorry, I've kind of ended up going off a little bit there, but with Knockaert, I'd say keep him, because if he continues on this trajectory of improving at the moment, then he can be very, very useful for the second half of the season. But we haven't got as much out of him up to now as I'd hoped.
Is it fair to say, Sarah, all indications are Forest are trying to keep him, aren't they? Probably on loan. That's what the noise seems to be like. Is that right or not?
Yeah, I think that I can't see them taking up that option to buy at the moment. I think because he hasn't performed to the level that they'd expect. I think if they're going to do anything, trying to extend that loan seems like the most sensible option, and then review it again in the summer. Like David said, Chris Hughton, I think that's probably the not pleasing but promising thing, I suppose, is that there is more to come from him, that he's not reached his potential yet. And if you're thinking, well, in the second half of the season we're going to get more out of him, then that's encouraging. And I think that's probably, that might sway it. And I think that he would, they'll try and get him back if they can, probably on loan.
David, you talked about a number 10 and what they need. So is that number 10 recall Brennan Johnson, or is it too soon for him? Where do you stand on bringing Brennan Johnson back?
I mean, he scored goals in League One just like Tyler Walker did last season, didn't he? For Lincoln, scored some goals in League One, and sounds like he's doing well. Bring him back if he's going to play, but I don't see any point in bringing him back if you're going to play him for a little bit, or try him and then end up leaving him out for the rest of the year. What's the point? He's developing well at Lincoln, and he's doing well. And the fact that a player's gone out and done well doesn't mean Forest have done bad business by letting him go. It means they're doing good business, because they're giving a young player an opportunity to go and get first team football, and they're doing well and thriving and playing well in that environment. And maybe Forest will get a longer term benefit. Rushing him back to throw him into the first team in a possible relegation battle, if that's how it pans out, I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't seen him play. I've seen the fact that he's scored goals, and I've seen a couple of them, but I don't know how much to read into that, really. The difference between scoring goals against a team in League One to putting him up against teams at the top end of the Championship, how comparable is that? I don't know. That's something that Chris Hughton will know an awful lot better. I'm not sure, but equally, I'm not sure what else you get in terms of quality in January for that position. So I would possibly be inclined to say if they can get better, if they can get a really good number 10 in from somewhere, then I'd favour that, because I'd rather Brennan Johnson just go and get more out of his loan at Lincoln, and we'll see where he is ready for next season.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Clifton says Carvalho, but I think the only player who's in line to be recalled potentially is Brennan Johnson. No one else is coming back. And then the name we're all forgetting, Sarah, Simon Gill says Luke Freeman could be our number 10. I mean, he's not done a lot so far, but he's coming back from surgery. I suppose, are we foolish to write Freeman off at this stage of the season?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably a little bit like Knockaert and a lot of the players, really. He's not played to his potential. We haven't seen him play or have the impact that we kind of thought he would do. I think it's going to take time for him. Obviously, he's had this surgery. He's been out for quite a while now. So it's going to take time for him to get back up to scratch. But he can certainly have a part to play. I think he's somebody that Chris Hughton's going to look at and try and bring in and get him back in amongst the team. But I still think they need somebody else in that position as well. I think trying to find, I know they've got loads of midfielders, but trying to find a creative midfielder who can add a bit of something going forward, I think that has to be up on their list.
Yeah, and I suppose the big name to throw at you again, David, for your final opinion is Kamil Grzycki. has always been in the frame for months and months, almost signed at the last window. He's 32, so he's experienced. Is he the kind of player that you'd want them to bring in this month?
Well, if they start now, do you think they might get it done in time?
If they fire up the fax machine now?
Rather than leaving it to the very last 30 seconds and then finding that they were 20 seconds too late. Chris Hughton seems to like experience. He seems to favour experience, and he's done that over the last few weeks, even just in a small matter of, Loic Mbeso was on the bench the week and left him out in favour of bringing Scott McKenna back, and, Alex Martin missing out and bringing Knockout back. He seems to favour more experienced players. I think certainly at the moment, while they're at the bottom, I think he'd rather have a majority of experienced players around rather than younger ones. And that seems to be the way it works. He obviously likes Grisic, tried to sign him last time. So if that's, he's not been playing again. And this is what you get in January. These are not necessarily long-term thought out things that might take 12 months to chase a player and get the one you want at the right time. This is who can we get this window to help Forest out over the next few months. And he's somebody who Hughton knows and likes. And if he feels he can get the best out of him, and if he feels he can get him going despite having not played for a bit, then great. But again, this is where Forest are so many years in a row, where at the start of January, we're looking at who can fix this problem that we've got halfway through a season. And it just shouldn't be like that, but there's constant changeover of managers, a constant change of transfer policy, and a constant mishmash of signings over so long, and so many signings over so long, that once again, we're going to January, despite having made more than a team's worth of signings just a few months ago, thinking who can we sign now? Who's available that we can sign now to plug a gap? And it can't go on like that. Longer term, that has to change. And if you ask anybody at the club, they'll all agree, but they would have done for years. And it's all continued to be the same. So I think that's the bigger problem underlying all of this. But here we are again, start of January, thinking who can Forest get to put some cross into the box or to fill the number 10 position. And if Chris Hughton believes he can get Grisic in and firing and playing well quickly enough, then great.
Now, I'm going to throw some names at you, and all you're allowed to do is say stay or go, or here or gone, in fact, for the end of the window. And Sarah, I'll throw them at you first. These are current Forest players. Will they still be here at the end of January?
Is this will they be, or do we want them to be?
Will they be? Will they be?
Okay.
Yes or no? Guerrero.
I don't know. Tough one. I'm thinking too much about that. It's a tough one.
I think Snowfire, Sarah, from you.
I know. I'll go with no.
Yanu.
No.
Darikwa.
No.
Clough.
Oh gosh. Yes, but I think that Forest will again try and move him on.
Yeah, and Heffler.
Probably the same.
Probably.
They've been here, but there's been so many windows where those two have been possibilities to leave and just haven't been able to get fixed up with something. I'm sure Forest will try for both of them again, but it's easier said than done when you're not playing games.
And then David, I'm going to throw the same names at you. So Guerrero.
No, I think that I think probably he'd go. Yeah.
Yanu?
Sorry, I've meant this meant to be one word. Sorry, I'm not.
No, it's
right.
I'll set the tone, David. So
short answers.
Deliberate as much as you like.
Yanu.
Yanu, I quite liked him when we saw him earlier in the season. I sort of thought he got quite a decent left foot. I quite liked him, but by the sounds of it, it seems like he might go. But I quite liked him a bit earlier in the season. But there we go.
And then Darikwa, Clough, and Heffler. What do you think about them?
Yeah, again, as Sarah rightly points out, players like Clough, he's been around for so long and nowhere near the team, but who's gonna take those players, and so I think it's going to be really tough to find a home for them, really. But it's been interesting actually talking across our social media platform. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, that when we've talked about transfers, the comment that you get is a lot of sort of exhaustion about the whole thing. And actually what people say they want is players out rather than players in, which is kind of the wrong way for a supporter to think, because supporters normally are like, who can we bring in to boost the squad? And all fans say is, can we just get rid of some of these others that are just kind of hanging around? Could we have a smaller squad, please? And it's that feeling that's been built up over the years of this become a sort of transfer apathy, and it becomes a bit more less exciting when players sign, and more interested in, can the squad be smaller? Can we have a tighter unit of a squad that can create a good team spirit? And that's the longest answer to a quick fire question you'll ever get.
One more name for you, David. I think I asked this to Sarah the other day. Forest have been linked with Shane Duffy today, centre half, which makes no sense unless you're selling a centre half. So Joe Worrell still here at the end of the month or not?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I certainly want him to be here at the end of the season. I mean, if he is able to move to the Premier League, I don't think any supporter would necessarily blame him. But I'd like him to be there. If you're going to be down at this end of the table at this stage, he's somebody I want in the Forest defence to help lead the charge out of it.
Let's finish up by turning our attention then to the FA Cup tie against Cardiff at the weekend. A weird question. Do we want Forest to win? Bearing in mind coronavirus postponements that are rife and everything, is it a good thing if Forest win the game, Sarah?
They won't be going out there to try and lose the game, but I think if they got knocked out, I don't think it would be too big a deal. It would be nice to keep that momentum going, and I could see why you would perhaps want to get that win, because then you make it obviously 6 unbeaten and you feel like you're on a little bit more of a roll. But if they didn't, I don't think anybody would be too disappointed because of how congested the season is anyway at the moment. I think that's probably about where they're at. It's going to be interesting to see what team Chris Hughton picks, whether he gives a few players who haven't had a chance a run out, have a look at them, maybe some of the younger players. It's going to be interesting to see what 11 he picks.
If all clubs approach it that way, what a great opportunity to try and win the FA Cup this year. If everybody's not going to bother that much, then let's do it. Let's go and let's actually have a good cup run for once.
I suppose looking at Cardiff's results, I mean, Forest might enjoy putting another nail in Neil Harris's coffin because they're bang out of form. Cardiff are really struggling, so I suppose they're going to have to go for it, aren't they, David?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, but as Sarah said, it isn't the priority. Of course, it's not, but it never is it? And with Forest where they are in the league, of course, that is where they've got to kind of focus all of their attentions. And you don't want a fixture backlog of FA Cup games like. Well, we're so pleased to lose to Barnsley on the opening day, weren't we? But I don't know. I just like the FA Cup, and I'm old. I'm sort of still of that era where I just like it, just inherently, fundamentally like the competition, regardless of anything else surrounding it. I just like it. I like a knockout competition. I like to see Forest involved in a knockout cup competition, regardless of what effect that has. I mean, not obviously if it ends up impacting them to such an extent that it would see them relegated, but I can't think it would do that. Really, you're talking about a few games and a possibility maybe of a big game later on in the year. Not that fans would be able to go, I know, and so what's the point of having Liverpool away or Manchester United away if you can't go? Yeah, I get that, but there's still I can't help it. I can't quite say the words the FA Cup and then say don't care if Forest lose, because I do.
And there's a few names being thrown in here, Sarah, players that should play. Mighton, so Kanate, who's a young player who's done well in the under-23s. Will Swan would be another one. Do you think that might be the kind of team that we see? That would, like David said earlier, that wouldn't be very Hughton, would it? He does favour experience.
No, I think maybe Alex Mighton perhaps might get a game, but I don't think you would see those kind of players starting. They might be on the bench. They might come on for the last few minutes, but he doesn't tend to favour giving the young players, throwing them into the starting 11, really. I think maybe you might see some of the more fringe first team players who haven't had much game time. Perhaps it might be one where Scott McKenna comes in, builds up his minutes again after coming back from injury, was on the bench on Saturday, obviously didn't get on. So it might be an opportunity for him. Maybe Lower Combe So. Chris Hughton seems to like him. He just hasn't been, he's obviously lost his place in the starting 11, so maybe it's one for him as well. Maybe others like Gaten Bond. he was on the bench on Saturday, hasn't played too much. So players like that, I think perhaps more of an opportunity for Chris Hughton to have a look at.
Yeah, I wonder if we might see Bashiru actually. I mean, he's been training for a few weeks, the old proverbial new signing. Hopefully he's good. Right, I think we'll have to leave it there. So thanks very much to everyone who watched along and joined us and asked lots of questions and comments, even the ones who said I was wrong about Jordan Henderson. Sarah, thank you very much for your time. And David, thank you very much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Excellent. And we shall be back probably next week or later in the week, depending on what happens, because I'm very unorganised and have planned absolutely nothing. So thanks very much.